In this problem, we will explore how to read expressions. For example, the symbol here, even though it's identical to the symbol here, you would use two different words when reading them. When the symbol is between two numbers, like this one is, this is the number 7 and this is the number 4. In this case, the symbol is what's called an operator. It's something that acts on the two numbers. Or you could think of it as telling you what to do with the two numbers. In this case, we're going to add them rather than subtract them. Now let's compare that with this symbol, which is not between two numbers. You could think of this symbol as being just to the left of the number 7, but there's no number to the left of it. So it's not telling us to add two numbers, it's simply telling us about the number 7. It's telling us that it's not -7, that it's a +7. So if the symbol is to the left of a number, not between numbers, it is not an operator. It simply is the sign of the number. And if the symbol looks like this, then you would read it as positive. If the symbol looked like this, you would either use the word negative or opposite of. If it's between two numbers and the symbol looks like this, you can use the word plus. If you have this symbol between two numbers, we will use the word minus. So for this example, because this is on the left of a number and not between numbers, we will read this as +7. This symbol being between two numbers looks like this, we will use the word plus. So this is +7 plus 4. Notice the symbols look identical, but the words that we use are not. +7 plus 4, or many times if a number is positive, like in this case, we would leave the symbol off, and you still could read it as +7 plus 4, because lack of a symbol here indicates that the number is positive. However, we would just read it as 7 plus 4, saying the word 7 without saying its sign implies that it's positive. Now let's look at this example. Because this sign is between two numbers, it's between the number 7 and the number 4, and it looks like this, it's an operator. It tells you to take 7 and minus 4, or you may hear someone say 7 subtract 4. It would be okay if you said +7 minus 4, but we typically would just read this as 7 minus 4. It would not be correct to say 7 negative 4. You don't use the word negative when the sign is between two numbers, as in this context the symbol indicates we are doing something with the two numbers. We are operating on the two numbers 7 and 4. The fact that it's minus just tells you what action we are to perform. Here's an example where you have a couple choices. Notice here that this symbol is not between two numbers. We're not operating on two numbers. This is simply telling me something about the number 3. This says it's not +3, that it is -3. But it's also correct to use the language opposite of. So you have a choice. You could either say -3 or you could say the opposite of 3. But because it's not between two numbers, it would not be correct to say -3. Because this symbol is between two numbers, it is an operator, and I would not use the word positive. It would not be correct to say the opposite of 3, +4. Because it's an operator, it's between two numbers, we must use the word plus. This is read either -3 plus 4 or the opposite of 3 plus 4. It's because this symbol can be read using two different words, makes for two different possible ways to read it. In this case, I chose to use the word negative. In this case, I chose to use the word opposite of. Either way, they mean the same thing. The opposite of 3 means the same thing as -3. Let's try this example. Here's another example where I have this symbol not between two numbers, but just to the left of a number, telling me something about the number 7. The number 7 is not positive, it is negative. Most of the time we would use the word -7, but it is correct to say the opposite of 7. So you have two choices here. For this one, because it's between two numbers, in fact it's between the number -7 and 4, and it looks like this, we are going to say that that's the word minus. So putting it together, most of the time we would say -7, and we use this one, and then since this was in between the numbers, it was an operator, we would say -4. -7 minus 4. In this example, starting with this could be read as just 3. If you wanted, because there's no sign, you could say +3. But I'm just going to use the word 3 in my answer. Because this symbol is between two numbers, in fact it's between the number 3 and the number -4, this symbol is an operator. It's between two numbers. It's something that you do with the two numbers. You're acting on the two numbers by adding them. So we read this as plus. So far we have 3 plus, and then here you have a choice. This symbol is not between two numbers. It doesn't say that we're taking a number here and adding or subtracting to a number here. It's simply telling me that this isn't 4, that it's negative 4. But because you have a choice, you could say negative 4 or the opposite of 4. You do have a choice of saying opposite of instead of negative. But in this context, most of the time you'll hear people say 3 plus negative 4 and use this version as opposed to this. You should know that both are correct, however. This problem has so many different ways of writing it. For example, this symbol is not between two numbers. If it were, there would be a number sitting right here. So we are not taking a number minus 3. This symbol is simply telling me that we're not dealing with 3. We're dealing with negative 3, or if you want, the opposite of 3. So when you write the statement, you can use negative 3, or you can say the opposite of 3, and both will be correct. Now to explain this symbol, that symbol is between the number negative 3 and the number negative 7. So it's telling me that I must do something with the two numbers. So it is an operator. It is something you do with two numbers. So we are going to read this symbol as an operator, but because it looks like this, we will use the word minus in our answer. So I wrote minus. Finally, this symbol here is not an operator. If it were an operator, there would be a number just to the left, not another sign. So notice I put it in red to indicate that we're not taking a number minus 7. This is simply telling me that when we do this subtraction, the negative 3 minus, that we are not to minus 7, we are going to minus the number negative 7, or the opposite of 7. So notice in my statement, I gave both possibilities to call it negative 7, or you could say the opposite of 7. Both would be correct. So let's go through a couple different ways you could say it correctly. You could say negative 3 minus negative 7. This would be the most common way. Another way would be to change this to this, in which case it would be negative 3 minus the opposite of 7. All would be correct. This example also has many correct ways of saying it, but notice I will never use the words plus or minus, as in there's only one number here. This here is either read the opposite of 7 or negative 7, because to use the word minus, there would have to be two numbers, and there's simply not another number. Let me just jump to the most common way of saying this. Because there's not two numbers, both of these symbols, here and here, you can use either negative or opposite of. But the most common way to say it, we typically use the word opposite of, and for this symbol, we typically say negative. So this would be read the opposite of negative 7, meaning this is the number negative 7, but we want the opposite of negative 7. So the opposite of negative 7 would be the most common way to read this notation.